Welcome to our Vulnerable Sector Protection Policy Training video for employees and ministry leaders working with children, youth, and vulnerable adults at North Park Community Church. We are committed to creating safe environments in which individuals can both serve and be served in the name of Jesus. God deeply cares for all people, including children and those who are vulnerable or marginalized and in need of a little extra care, love, and attention. The unfortunate reality is that vulnerable persons are potential targets for abuse from those who are in positions of power and trust in their lives. As a result, our church has created this vulnerable sector protection policy, which is designed to educate and empower ministry leaders to practice good risk management while providing the best care possible for those who cannot always best care for themselves. Vulnerable persons are specifically identified by the police department as children and youth under the age of 18, elderly over the age of 65, and any individual with a physical or mental disability. This particular video that you are watching is Part A of the training process. In Part A, we will summarize the essential issues related to the policy that all leaders must know, regardless of the program they minister within. Part B is a separate training video that looks in greater detail at the issues and procedures that relate to a specific area of ministry, such as children's ministry, youth ministry, pastoral care, or refugee settlement. To prepare to serve in your particular ministry area, please watch both Part A and the unique Part B training video required for your specific area of ministry. At the end of each training video, you will complete a short online quiz to confirm you have watched the video and received adequate training. Thank you for your engagement in this training material and helping us to care for those and to protect the vulnerable people whom we serve with the love of Jesus. Essentially, our vulnerable sector protection policy at North Park Community Church is a commitment to one overarching statement. We declare zero tolerance for abuse, harassment, and neglect. Adhering to this one statement accomplishes the following three objectives: to protect children, youth, and vulnerable adults who are in our care, to protect ministry leaders from potential false allegations, and to protect the witness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. The unfortunate reality is that abuse is the #1 risk for organizations working with children, youth, and vulnerable adults. And accusations of abuse and actual abuse ultimately cost the same financially, emotionally, and spiritually. Consequently, this training is not only mandatory, but essential in helping ministry leaders like yourself create safe environments in which to experience the love of Jesus for everyone involved. Step 1 to ensuring a safe ministry environment for vulnerable persons is to require that all ministry workers go through a mandatory screening process, which includes filling out a volunteer application form, which is available online, providing 2 background reference checks, having a personal interview with an approved ministry leader, applying for and submitting a vulnerable sector police check to the church. Now, only volunteers 18 years of age or over are required to apply for this VSC. Completing Part A and Part B of our Vulnerable Sector Protection Policy training is the final step. Typically, a 6-month waiting period for volunteers new to our church community is required. However, this may be waived with a pastoral letter of reference from a previous church in which the individual has consistently served without concern. Step 2 to ensuring a safe environment for ministry is to equip ministry leaders with a proper understanding of abuse, including how to properly identify, prevent, and report it. The term abuse covers 6 main categories: physical, emotional, sexual, neglectful, financial, and religious. Abuse in all categories have indicators or symptoms and clues that ministry leaders must be aware of in order to help individuals who may be in need of protection. It's important to remember that all forms of abuse are deeply harmful and have a lasting impact on the lives of everyone involved. So, we must be careful to take time to know and observe those who are under our care. An indicator alone does not prove abuse, but it does alert us to the possibility that abuse may have occurred and a vulnerable person may require our help or assistance. Let's look more closely at the 6 main categories of abuse and their indicators, which can be used to help identify the possibility of abuse. Physical abuse. Physical abuse is defined as any intentional action by a caregiver which results in physical injury or harm to a vulnerable person. Physical abuse is often the most observable form of abuse because of certain physical indicators like bruises or welts, lacerations, burns, or abrasions. It's important to remember that people, especially children, can be physically injured by accidents quite often. So the fact that they have a bruise or a cut does not necessarily mean that abuse has occurred. The key word to remember here is intentional. The intent to do harm is a clear indication of abuse. Intentional abusive physical injuries are typically 1, consistent, indicating a repeated behavior, and 2, suspicious, maybe because of their size, shape, or location on the body, indicating that someone else has been directly involved with an abuse of power. Persons suffering physical abuse may also exhibit certain behavioral tendencies, like the inability to explain their injuries, abdominal pain, fear, or anxiety around others. A strong avoidance of being touched, perhaps, or even the possibility of aggressive physical behavior towards others as they mirror what they have experienced themselves. Purposefully injuring a person is never acceptable and is against the law. Emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is defined as a pattern of overt rejection, belittling, blaming, or accusing, finding fault, or shouting at somebody. When looking for indicators of emotional abuse, it is important to remember that everyone has emotions that can range from day to day. The key word here to remember is pattern, indicating ongoing, intentional emotional abuse. Those who may be suffering from such abuse can show the following indicators. 1, consistently low mood, indicating repeated, overwhelming emotional experiences. 2, regular negative facial expressions and body language, indicating low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, or emotional withdrawal. And 3, an unhealthy tendency to blame or belittle others, again imitating the behavior that they have consistently experienced. Neglectful abuse. Neglectful abuse is the chronic inattention or omission on the part of a caregiver to provide for the basic emotional and/or physical needs of a vulnerable person. Neglectful abuse is easily overlooked as it can often be excused, but is deeply harmful to an individual. The main thing to remember is that it is a patterned behavior which occurs over a period of time. The key words to remember here are chronic or ongoing inattention. Here are some indicators to be aware of when it comes to neglectful abuse. Consistent hunger or malnutrition, indicating inadequate provision of food. Constant poor hygiene, showing a lack of basic care of the body. Or a lack of attachment to a parent or caregiver, demonstrating an unhealthy bond due to the absence of proper affection and care. Neglect can often be misinterpreted because of needs that arise due to issues related to poverty or other situational realities. So be careful as a caregiver to differentiate between the two and discreetly offer help where needed and when appropriate. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is defined as the use of an individual for the sexual gratification of another and includes indecent exposure, inappropriate touch, masturbation, and intercourse. Sexual abuse is often the most hidden form of abuse because of the deep shame associated with it. While physical indicators of sexual abuse are often hidden, certain indicators that can imply sexual abuse are physical pain or difficulty when sitting down, walking, or using the washroom, indicating trauma to the genitals or the buttocks. Overt sexualized behavior, exhibiting inappropriate sexualized speech or play. Extreme fear of physical touch, indicating the physical abuse of power through touch. Financial abuse. Financial abuse is defined as the purposeful misuse of funds or assets of another. As a ministry leader, you should never be put in charge of making financial decisions for a vulnerable person without having a witness present for accountability. As well, vulnerable persons should never be pressured or coerced into giving funds or assets to the church or other individuals. The key words to remember here are purposeful misuse, indicating intent to trick or deceive for personal gain at the expense of the vulnerable person's financial assets, whether property, possessions, or money. Religious abuse. Religious abuse is generally defined as disrespecting an individual's personal beliefs that differ from your own, and or using coercion and manipulation to forcibly persuade someone else to accept something that you believe. Vulnerable persons should never feel forced into accepting a belief that they do not understand or agree with. Additionally, religious abuse can be understood as the use of your position of influence as a spiritual leader to take advantage of, in any way, an individual to whom you are providing care, compassion, and guidance. As a ministry leader, you are in a position of spiritual influence and power. Be sure to be above reproach when it comes to serving those who are in your care, especially when they express vulnerable emotions, thoughts, and experiences with you in more private or confidential spaces. As a church, we have zero tolerance for abuse of any kind, recognizing that all forms of abuse are unacceptable and deeply hurtful to everyone involved. If you feel that someone in your care is potentially being abused, you are encouraged to filter what you observe through 3 words: ask, care, and act. Ask more clarifying questions as appropriate. Don't interrogate, but ask with curiosity and compassion for more information. Secondly, care for the individual. Most concerns are usually adequately addressed with some further understanding and intentional expressions and actions of concern. And lastly, act. If you strongly feel that a vulnerable person in your care is experiencing abuse, you have a legal duty to report. To report suspected abuse, use the following reporting procedure. 1. Immediately contact your ministry director and together complete a suspected abuse report form that will be provided for you by your ministry director. 2. Fulfill statutory reporting obligations to Children's Aid Society or police authorities when reporting abuse involving minors who are under the age of 18. 3. Assure a compassionate response to the alleged victim and their family and do not confront the accused. 4. Maintain confidentiality for the alleged victim and perpetrator by not making any public statements or discussing anything with friends or colleagues. 5. If the alleged perpetrator is a church volunteer, the volunteer will be immediately suspended from serving until the outcome of the investigation. And 6. If necessary, the church will consult a lawyer and report the incident to the insurance company. Reporting abuse is serious business and requires thorough documentation and proof of proper procedure. While this process will seem overwhelming, your ministry director will be sure to walk you through it all and support you through the process. Harassment is also considered a form of abuse that will not be tolerated and must be dealt with in an appropriate manner. Harassment can be experienced child to child, youth to youth, leader to leader, and should be addressed immediately. Harassment is defined as chronically annoying or tormenting another and includes any unwanted physical or verbal behavior that offends, intimidates, or humiliates. The important thing to remember about harassment is that it is always understood by the interpretation and the experience of the receiver, not the intent of the initiator. Unwanted physical or verbal behavior that persists is harassment. Harassment can be personal, sexual, racial, or ethnic in nature and will not be tolerated in any of our ministry environments. In dealing with incidents of harassment, you should take the following steps. 1. Clearly identify the behavior to all involved and ask the behavior to stop. 2. As a leader, be sure to note who, where, when, and what was involved. 3. If the harassment continues, report it to your ministry director. Step 4. Together with your ministry director, fill out an incident report form to document the details of the identified behavior. And lastly, remember to keep everything confidential, ensuring those involved do not experience unwanted publicity or shame. If further incidents occur, church leadership will step in and handle next steps. Remember, our vulnerable sector prevention policy at North Park Community Church is a commitment to one overarching statement. We declare zero tolerance for abuse, harassment, and neglect. Physical contact is an important element in communicating love and care to children, youth, and vulnerable adults, and should not be avoided, but should always be done in an age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate way. Examples of physical contact that are considered appropriate are holding hands, pats on the head, shoulder or back, shoulder hugs, or even brief regular hugs. But examples of physical contact that are considered inappropriate and should be avoided are kissing, extended hugging or tickling, and all touching in any area that would be covered by a bathing suit. One basic overarching best practice when it comes to physical contact with children and vulnerable persons is to make sure that it is done in view of others who can witness the interaction. Never have physical contact with someone in your care when you are alone. Like physical contact, discipline is an important element in teaching and training and should not be avoided, but again should always be done in an appropriate manner. Examples of proper discipline would be clear and polite communication with a firm voice but never yelling, redirected behavior that offers choices rather than making demands, a short timeout where there is a separation from the group but still within the classroom, and certainly a follow-up of one-on-one conversation with an explanation of the inappropriate behavior. On the contrary, examples of inappropriate discipline are punishing behavior that causes pain or shame to the individual, spanking or striking a child or vulnerable person, or using threats or hurtful words. Overpowering a vulnerable person physically is also definitely inappropriate, unless it is for their own safety or for your safety that you need to step in. The overarching principle behind discipline is to be sure that direction is given with truth and grace, rather than punishment that leads to hurt or shame. Ministry leaders should also ensure that inappropriate behavior is brought to the attention of a caregiver so that proper follow-up can happen at home. Media and technology has a major influence in our world and in our ministries. With advancements in technology happening so quickly, we cannot control every aspect of media and technology. But when it comes to properly using social media and technology, we as a church have committed to do our best to 1. Not allow unsupervised internet access during ministry programming that involves children, youth, and vulnerable adults. 2. Avoiding individual photography and tagging or clearly identifying specific children whenever possible, focusing rather on group shots. 3. Respecting the confidentiality of children, youth, and vulnerable adults by not posting personal information about others on social media. 4. We will remove any photograph for church social media platforms that we are asked to remove or change by parents, legal guardians, or caregivers. Generally speaking, it is assumed that by attending a public ministry event that consent to be photographed is given, unless otherwise indicated. It's also a good practice to clearly identify yourself as taking pictures for North Park Community Church by perhaps wearing a name lanyard or making an announcement at the beginning of a group gathering. When it comes to ministry programming that is online or virtual, Ministry leaders are reminded to follow all the same best practices from in-person ministry. The reality is that all forms of abuse can still occur online in any virtual setting. A few specific best practices for any online ministry, though, include always having 2 recognized and clearly identified leaders in any virtual space where vulnerable persons are present. Have a plan for how you will handle inappropriate behavior or engagement within the chat room or other features of the media platform you're using. Know how to disconnect online participants if necessary, or how to quickly close the virtual space for everyone involved if necessary. Keep online links as private as possible in order to deter any unwanted participants from entering your virtual ministry space. Record, with permission, your online event whenever possible to document the event and all individuals in attendance. As we have all experienced, technology changes quickly, and there is always an element of risk in any environment, including our virtual ones. Ministry leaders are asked to do their best to follow these overarching best practices to help plan for and provide safe, interactive environments for all of our persons and online ministry programming. One final step in creating a safe ministry environment is handling injuries or medical needs as they arise. Minor injuries occasionally happen and can be handled and managed by you. Examples of minor injuries would be scrapes, small cuts, bumps, and bruises. For all minor injuries, Band-Aids or ice packs may be applied if necessary by all ministry leaders. While you can treat these minor injuries, do so with care and ensure you follow up and communicate the injury and care provided to a parent or caregiver. Unlike minor injuries, however, major injuries rarely happen and cannot be handled by you alone. Examples of major injuries would include broken bones, unconsciousness, seizures, severe allergic reactions, and head injuries. In response to major injuries, you must take the following steps. 1. Keep calm and don't move the injured individual unless absolutely necessary. 2. Send for the ministry director immediately. 3. Contact the family and call 911 if necessary. Please note that if an EpiPen is used, 911 must be called. 4. Fill out an incident report form with your ministry director as soon as possible to ensure the details of the events are documented. Thank you for taking the time to watch this Vulnerable Persons Protection Policy training video. We all play a vital role in creating safe environments where children, youth, and vulnerable adults are properly cared for and cared about. This Part A video has outlined the responsibilities that all ministry leaders and volunteers have in creating safe ministry environments. Thank you for serving, protecting, and loving vulnerable persons through the ministries offered across our church community.